Nearly 6 years have passed since Ben McDaniel disappeared while freshwater scuba diving, and despite extensive and expensive search efforts, clues as to what happened to the then 30-year-old Tennessee native remain sketchy and unresolved. The oldest of three brothers, born to Shelby and Paddy McDaniel, Ben had endured a failed marriage, a bankrupt construction company that left him despondent. In addition, he was saddled with a hefty tax debt, estimated to be $50,000, and he was still deeply affected by the 2008 death of his younger brother Paul from a stroke. Returning to his parents' suburban Memphis home, McDaniel took up their offer to take a sabbatical to Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, where the family maintained a beach home. The move appeared to be beneficial as he gradually began to be returning to normal, aided greatly by rediscovering one of his boyhood passions, scuba diving. He soon became a regular at Vortex Springs, one of Florida's largest freshwater diving facilities. August 18, 2010 had been a typical hot summer day in the region, and at around 7:30 p.m, McDaniel was seen by two other divers as he descended into the springs, presumably headed for a cave. A popular attraction for divers, primarily due to the challenges it offered. The cave had a well-diverse reputation for being extremely treacherous, so much so that the state had debated banning it following 13 deaths attributed to it in the 1990s. In response, the owners had placed a sign at the cave's entrance discouraging further exploration. A second deterrent, a locked gate, was placed some 300 feet further into the cave. A key to unlock the gate was available at the dive shop, but was only given to certified cave divers, which McDaniel wasn't. But his presence at the facility had become commonplace, so one of the two divers, employees at the dive shop, who had spotted McDaniel as he began his dive, followed him to the cave, unlocked the gate, then resurfaced. He remains the last known person to see Ben McDaniel. 2 days later, when McDaniel's truck was noticed to still be in the parking lot, the Holmes County Sheriff's Department was notified, and following an initial search turned up nothing but Ben's keys, wallet, containing $700, a cell phone in the truck. Word spread quickly and a detailed search began. The McDaniel family was contacted, and for the next 3 days, volunteer divers and cadaver dogs scoured the cave and surrounding swampland, with the only recovered evidence being 2 oxygen tanks discovered at the cave's entrance. Professional water rescue teams were brought in, but after 36 days of exhaustive search efforts, there was no positive results. The family then offered a sizable reward, but when a diver, ostensibly searching for clues, became trapped and died in the cave, an uproar ensued in the diving community, claiming that the reward had become too much of a temptation, endangering not only the safety of the divers, but also that of subsequent rescue efforts. The reward was then rescinded. Several theories have been proposed over the ensuing years, including foul play, McDaniel staging his own disappearance in order to escape his financial burden, and perhaps the most likely possibility, McDaniel becoming trapped, drowning, and eventually being devoured by aquatic predators. After 6 years, it's unlikely that the tragic saga of Ben McDaniel will ever be definitively uncovered, adding his name to the long list of unexplained disappearances that continue to baffle and mystify. "26 years ago, on April 10, 1990, 4 men left on a commercial fishing expedition out of Georgia. 5 days later, one of those men was found clinging to life in a makeshift boat made out of a bait box. The 3 other crew members have never been found. This is the story of the Cassie Nicole, a boat captained by Billy Joe Naismith. The other crew consisted of Billy Joe's brother, Nathan, their nephew, Keith Wilk, and a friend, Franklin Brentley. On the second day of the trip, Nathan discovered the boat was not running right, and he woke up his brother to alert him. Further investigation showed that not only was there a mechanical issue with the craft, but it was taking a lot of water. All the men attempted to bail out of the boat's cabin by hand, but the effort was in vain. The bilge pumps were not operational for some unknown reason. At one point, the boat lost all power. The decision was then made to abandon ship. Billy Joe directed the other three to get into the life craft. According to Nathan, the life raft was in poor condition and had a hole in it. The men stayed on the raft until they found a large floating piece of debris from the Cassie Nicole that they took refuge on. Nathan then noticed the hull of Cassie Nicole about 3 miles away. Against the protest of the other three and pleased to stay together, Nathan swam out to the hull, a feat which took him almost a full day to complete. The next morning, he noticed a freighter in the area where he thought his brother and the other 2 men would have been located. The freighter acted oddly, travelling in circles, and appeared to stop several times. This gave Nathan the impression they were picking something up out of the water. Nathan was found barely clinging to life 3 days later. Though the Coast Guard launched an intensive search for them, no sign of the others was ever found. Theories about what happened to the missing men are varied. Some say Nathan's story is suspicious. The claims he swam for over 7 hours to reach the hull, abandoned the others, and the freighter appearance are far-fetched. They feel he was either directly involved, or the 4 of them were a part of a drug trafficking ring, and something went awry. Others, interested in the story, think the freighter was involved in the drug trafficking and that crew took the men prisoner or killed them to keep them quiet. The family holds with the idea that the men were taken prisoner by the crew on the freighter and have been held in a foreign country, possibly Cuba. The fuel for these thoughts is a series of bizarre phone calls that the Naismith's sister, Juanita, and the Cassie Nicole's owner, Doug Tyson, received in the year following the disappearances. There was a total of 5 calls made to the 2 of them. The initial calls involved a man who appeared to only speak Spanish, stating the name and number of the person he was calling. The last call was from a man with a heavy accent who he said was bringing him home. The family and Doug believe that this man was referring to one or more of the missing men. They hold out hope that they are alive somewhere, though no evidence has been found to support that theory. The government has declared the men missing at sea and presumed dead. The public may never find out the true fate of these men, and it will remain a secret of the Atlantic, an enigma that will forever have us speculating as to the fate of the crew members of the Cassie Nicole. On 4th December 1872, seaman John Johnson of the Dicrata informed Captain Morehouse that he spotted a vessel off the port bow, 3820 north, 1715 west, and 600 miles west of Portugal. As this vessel drew closer to the Dicrata, they noticed that only 3 sails were still set. The remainder of the sails had either been blown away or not raised. Something seemed amiss, and after repeated attempts to contact the members of this ship, Captain Morehouse ordered 3 sailors to board her for inspection. As these sailors rowed towards the ship, they noticed the name, Mary Kelsey, New York, written on the stern. Mary Kelsey was approximately 100 feet long with an ornamental scroll on her bow. She was built in Nova Scotia in 1860 and originally named the Amazon. She displaced 280 tons and was registered as half a brig. Upon climbing on board, they realized it was unmanned. The vessel was noted to have minimal damage, but overall in proper working order. The only thing that initially seemed out of place was that the lifeboat was missing. The captain of the Mary Celeste bed was unmade and toys laid on the deck. The last entry in the ship's log was dated 8 a.m. on 25th November 1872, stating all conditions were normal, and that they were near the Azores, approximately 6 miles from the island of Santa Maria. After a thorough search, the crew realized the chronometer, sextant navigation book, and ship's register were missing. The rigging was in disorder, and the binnacle was toppled and the steering compass was smashed in. They found a 6-month supply of food and fresh water, and a cargo consisting of 1,701 well-stowed and unopened barrels of raw alcohol, destined for Genoa, Italy, to fortify wine. The bilge contained only about 3 to 4 feet of water. The ship's crew and passengers' lockers still contained their clothing. Upon returning to the Dicreta, the sailors briefed Captain Morehouse on the results of their search. Ironically, Captain Morehouse knew the captain of the Mary Celeste as Captain Benjamin Spooner Biggs, and also his wife Sarah. In fact, Captain Morehouse had dinner with the Briggs the day before the Mary Celeste set sail from Pier 44 from New York City's East River on that fateful Tuesday, 5th November 1872. The Biggs had mentioned their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda, would be sailing with them. Biggs had also mentioned how pleased he was with his new professional crew. Captain Morehouse eventually decided to split his crew and sail the Mary Celeste and Delcratia to Galbator for her salvaging. Many theories were formulated as to what happened to the crew of Mary Celeste, but to date this mystery has yet to be solved. As a footnote, the Mary Celeste made history once again when Clive Cussler, best-selling novelist and adventurer representing the National Underwater Marine Agency, and John Davis, president of Eco Nova Productions of Canada, announced on 9th of August 2001 that they had discovered the remains of Mary Celeste on a reef off the coast of Haiti. Davis explained the ship sailed under different owners for 12 years, until her last captain loaded her with a cargo of cheap rubber boots and cat food before deliberately sinking her, and then filling an exorbitant insurance claim for an exotic cargo that never existed. Unfortunately for the captain, his plan fell apart after running the ship onto a rootless reef in Haiti. The ship hung up on the coral and refused to sink. Insurance inspectors investigated and found the worthless cargo. The captain and his first mate were later convicted on charges of what was then known as barratry. Philip Taylor Kramer, July 12, 1952 to February 12, 1995, started his career in rock music as the bass player to the reformed psychedelic group Iron Buttery. Although Iron Butterfly's most popular hit, Inagata Devada, was made before his joining, Philip Tyler Kramer recorded 2 albums with the Iron Buttery in the mid-70s, Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel. After lackluster sales, Kramer left the group in 1977 and concentrated on furthering his education. Kramer completed his aerospace engineering degree, and his genius was reflected in his straight A's in school. His first career following school was with the Northrop, working on the MX missile guidance system as a Department of Defense contractor. He eventually moved into the computer industry, working on facial recognition and communications programs. Immediately prior to his disappearance in 1995, he reportedly developed a mathematical formula for transmissions at a faster-than-light speed. This formula was an ongoing effort by his family to discredit Albert Einstein's theories. On 12th of February 1995, Kramer drove to the Los Angeles airport to pick up a business colleague who never showed up. After waiting almost an hour for his colleague, Kramer drove away and commenced to make some unusual phone calls. He called his wife and longtime friend, an Iron Butterfly drummer, Ron Bushy, stating, "I'll see you on the other side." He then called the police, where he stated, "This is Philip Tyler Kramer." This is 911. Can I help you, sir?" "Yes, you can. I'm going to kill myself, and I want everyone to know O.J. Simpson is innocent. They did it." Philip Tyler Kramer never returned home that day, and his disappearance lasted for over 4 years. On 29th of May 1999, hikers discovered a wrecked 1993 Ford Aerostar at the bottom of a Malibu, California ravine. Skeletal remains in the vehicle were later identified through dental records as that of Philip Tyler Kramer. Despite law enforcement ruling this as a probable suicide, family and friends of Philip Tyler Kramer discount this theory. Kramer's spouse stated, "Her husband would never, for any reason or under any circumstances, allow himself to completely abandon the family he loves more than life itself." If Philip Tyler Kramer did in fact commit suicide, he successfully withheld these thoughts from his friends and family. So, the question remains, did Philip Tyler Kramer kill himself, or was he silenced for his monumental discovery that would have discredited the life work of many influential people? The Flannan Isles are a group of rocky, uninhabited islands in Scotland. They are named for St. Flannan, but are also known as the Seven Hunters. One of the largest of these 7 islands is the rocky cliff edge island, known as Eilean Mor. Eilean Mor has a grassy hilltop at its apex. Perched atop this grassy hill is the lighthouse that is known as the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse was the scene of 3 mysterious disappearances roughly 1 year after it was built. 3 men vanished from the lighthouse without a trace. There was no sign of a disturbance, and very few clues to the nature of their fate. The scene was reminiscent of that aboard the Mary Celeste, when her crew and passengers famously disappeared roughly 30 years before. On December 7, 1900, Donald MacArthur, Thomas Marshall and James Ducat arrived at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse to begin their 2-week rotation as keepers of the lighthouse. The superintendent of lighthouses, Robert Moorhead, came with them to do a routine check of the lighthouse and speak to the men. He made certain that everything was in working order and then spoke with James Ducat about some difficulties they were having with the heavy mist that commonly surrounded the island. The men then said goodbye to the superintendent and he left. The lighthouse was regularly monitored from the mainland by telescope. This way, if there was an emergency, the men could signal for help. Unfortunately, there was a problem with the mist. The lighthouse was seen on December 7th and December 12th. The lighthouse was also seen on December 15th by a passing ship. The crew noted that the light was not shining, as it should have been. It was not seen from land again until December 29th, well after the men should have ended their rotation. The ship that was to deliver the men's relief and bring them home from the Flannan Isles Lighthouse was delayed until December 21st, because of a run of bad weather. When the ship, the SS Hesperus, arrived in Eilean Mor, the men on board expected to see a flag flying to indicate that the keepers had noted their arrival and would be deploying a rowboat to retrieve their relief. However, the flag was not flying, nor did the men respond to a siren. A landing craft with 2 men on board was launched from the SS Hesperus, with 2 men on board. When the 2 men reached Eilean Mor, one man, Joseph Moore, went up to check the lighthouse for the 3 missing men. He found the entrance locked. He unlocked the door and entered to find the Flannan Isles Lighthouse unmanned. The clock on the wall had stopped. No fire was in the grate, nor had one been there for a few days. There was a meal sitting at the table. It looked like someone had set it down with the intention of eating it soon, but it was untouched. Whatever had happened to the men, it had happened to them suddenly. There was nothing anyone could do about it, with so few clues. So 4 men, including Moore, were left on the island to operate the lighthouse, and everyone else left. The records of the 3 Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers were subsequently inspected. It was discovered that Eilean Mor was hit with a strong storm on December 14th. The last entry was made in the afternoon of December 15th. Superintendent Moorhead concluded that the men must have taken by nature when they left the lighthouse to repair some damage that was done to a storage container outside during the storm. One of his theories, the most likely, was that a large wave came up on the men while they were working and swept all 3 of them into the Atlantic Ocean, where they died. Moorhead's theory is largely regarded as truth. The only other alternatives seemed to be that the men left of their own accord. They were kidnapped, aliens intervened, or they were struck into another dimension, all which seemed ludicrous. Unfortunately, none of their bodies were ever recovered, so there is no way to be sure. Chronicled incidents of spontaneous human combustion, where a person bursts into flame with no apparent cause, date back to the late 15th century. Of the more recent episodes, however, none has been cited more often than that of Mary Reeser. A 67-year-old resident of St. Petersburg, Florida, Reeser spent the evening of July 1st, 1951, in an unremarkable way, receiving visits from her son and neighbour. At the time, Mary Reeser was wearing a rayon nightgown, bedtime slippers and a robe. When they left her, everything in the apartment appeared normal. The following morning, a telegram courier arrived and received no answer to his knock at the door. Summoning the same neighbour, they found the doorknob hot to the touch. The neighbour asked nearby construction workers, some sources say policemen, for help with getting into the apartment. Once inside, they found the apartment unusually warm, even though some of the windows were open. In one corner of the room, they found a pile of ashes, the burnt remains of a chair and lamp, and an electric clock with a melted plug that had stopped at 4:20 a.m. Other than the charred remnants in this corner, the apartment was completely undisturbed. Upon closer examination, they found a woman's left foot, still wearing a slipper. In the ashes, some sources say a shrunken human skull was also found. That's all that was left of Mary Reeser. There was no sign of a break-in or a burglary or any other outside influence in the apartment. The authorities were stumped and began to call in consultants to help. To the experts, clearly this was no ordinary fire. They estimated that a fire of 3,000 degrees burning for several hours would be needed to consume a human being so thoroughly. With a fire that hot, burning for that long, why wasn't the rest of the apartment, if not the entire building, burned down? St. Petersburg police solicited the help of the FBI, but the Bureau couldn't shed any light on the situation. Physical anthropologist Wilton Krogman, a consultant on the case, wrote, "I find it hard to believe that a human body, once ignited, will literally consume itself, burn inside out, as does a candle wick. Never have I seen a body so completely consumed by heat. This is contrary to normal experience, and I regard it as the most amazing thing I've ever seen. As I review it, the short hairs on my neck bristle with vague fear. Were I living in the Middle Ages, I'd mutter something about black magic." Possible explanations have been put forward, ranging from ball lightning to explosives. After an investigation that went nowhere, police finally and lamely put the cause as a neglected cigarette. The Taman shrew case, otherwise known as the case of Somerton Man, is the case of an unidentified dead body found on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia, at 6:30 a.m. on December 1st, 1948. It is unclear whether the man was murdered, committed suicide, or died of natural causes. This, on top of a number of mysterious clues in the case, has made it one of the most lasting mysteries in Australia's history. In fact, the case is so popular that Stephen King makes mention of it in The Colorado Kid, and part of the Heaven series is based on the case. On the night of November 30th, 1948, at least two groups of passers-by saw a man who looked like the man found the following morning, sitting on the edge of the beach. He sat in the same place where the Somerton man was found. The witnesses say that they did not get a very good look at him, but it was the same man from what they could tell. He sat barely moving when he was seen around 7 p.m. By 7:30 to 8 p.m, there was no discernible movement. One witness said he had wondered that the man was alive, but assumed he was drunk. A man sitting in that very spot was found early the next morning, dead. He wore a nice suit, pointing to at least a marginal amount of prosperity. There was an expensive British cigarette behind his ear, not sold in Australia. Another half-smoked cigarette of the same brand nestled between his cheek and collar. An interesting find was a pack of those cigarettes in his pocket, placed in the case of a cheaper brand. Also in the man's pocket was a book of matches, a used bus ticket, and an unused train ticket. All of the tags on the man's clothing were removed, making identification difficult. He was not wearing a hat, and his shoes were reportedly suspiciously clean. Another, very mysterious piece of evidence was found much later, in a hidden pocket in the man's pants. This piece of evidence was a scrap of paper cut from a book that said, Taman Shrew. The backside of the piece of paper was blank, but police traced it to the poetry book, The Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam. After some searching, police were able to find the very book from whence the words had been taken. The man had found the book discarded in the back seat of his car, with apparently no explanation as to how it came to be there. At the back of the book was the following sequence in pencil. Police believed it to be a code, but it is yet to be cracked. The strike through on the second series makes it look like a list as well. Also found written in the back of the book was the phone number of a woman who allegedly lived and worked near the place where the Somerton man was found. Her identity is being protected and her name given only as Justine. Justine once had a copy of the Ruby Chat, and police tracked it to a man she had given it 2 years before. He still had the book, and it was not unusual in any way. Police dismissed the woman and man as possible witnesses and dismissed the book, given that there was no evidence that it had anything to do with the case. During the time that police were investigating the scant few leads, numerous people claimed that the Somerton man was missing persons that they knew of. In every case, police were able to ascertain that the man was not the missing man in question. In some instances, missing people showed up at the police station to show that they were not the Somerton man. The autopsy on the Somerton man showing something quite interesting. There is no evidence of the cause of death. The man was 5'11", with green eyes and blondish red hair. He seemed in excellent health, save for congestion and bleeding in several organs. He was athletic, possibly a dancer or a runner, but not a labourer, as evidenced by the pristine condition of his hands. The doctor who performed the autopsy said that it looked like a particularly dangerous poison that was extremely difficult to identify in autopsy. He also said that it could have been a natural death, though he did not find the underlying cause. Either way, there was no way of knowing whether the man was suicidal or not, so even if they had found poison in his system, it did not make it a murder. In the end, no cause of death was determined. Police did suggest that they found his lack of ID to be evidence of a suicide. Frankly, this writer finds that, the shoddy evidence at best, lack of identification on this person could have meant anything from the dramatic, such as he was a spy who didn't want to be found, corroborated by his cigarettes, to the mundane, such as he left his identification at home. He had very little money on him and no wallet, which would be a better indication of suicide. But he could just as easily have brought little money with him on a day trip. That idea was squashed when evidence that he was certainly not on a logo jaunt came to a month and 2 weeks after his body was found. The Adelaide train station gave a suitcase to the police that the man had left in their coat room the day before he died. It should be mentioned that the time of death was given as 2 a.m. In the suitcase was a suit jacket, stenciling brush, paints with sand in the cuff, screwdriver, scissors and sharpened points, thread, pyjamas, underwear, dressing gown, shaving utensils, slippers, knife and laundry bag. The only labels on the clothing were the name T. Kane and drying numbers. A thorough investigation turned up no keys in the area with connection to the case. The jacket, however, led straight to America. British cigarettes and an American jacket made this man look more and more like a murdered James Bond. Unfortunately, they were unable to trace Somerton Bond's jacket to an exact location in the United States. In the end, the Taman case boils down to two things: a ton of evidence that leads nowhere, and a lack of evidence that borders on the suspicious. Missing clothes tags. Even the place of death is uncertain, because some feel that if the Somerset man had died there would be vomit on him and the vicinity of his body. Everything that came up about this case made it more mysterious. 74 years later, and it still does not make sense. Owen Parfit had lived a wild life by anybody's standards. He told tales of his youth that featured piracy and great battles and numerous women. Most people were skeptical of his stories, and he undoubtedly knew that, but it didn't stop him from recounting his glory days nonetheless. By the 1760s, Owen was in his 60s and people said his wild living had caught up with him. He was now a virtual cripple, living with his elderly sister in Sefton Mill, a town in southwest England. For a man who was used to moving freely from one adventure to another, the paralysis must have come as a heavy burden. He would have one final adventure that would capture the attention of Sefton Mill and neighbouring villages. The date is sketchy. Some sources claim the following took place in June of 1763, while others place it in 1768. Regardless, we do know that on a warm evening Owen Parfit wanted to sit outside. Due to his virtual immobility, he needed the assistance of his sister and a neighbour to carry him out into a chair on the front porch. When his sister returned into the house, Owen was sitting placidly in the chair. Across the road, a very short distance away, several farm workers were labouring within easy earshot of Owen. Certainly, if someone had approached him where he sat on the porch, somebody would have seen something. Nobody saw a thing. A storm was coming that evening, and so Owen's sister came out onto the porch to bring him back inside, but he was no longer in the chair. Knowing that he could not have moved anywhere by himself, she asked the farm workers if they had seen someone come and get him, but no one had. Panicking, the sister enlisted the help of the farm workers and neighbours to search the area. It was impossible Owen could have left on his own, so it seemed he would be easily found. Impossible, they never found a trace of the crippled man. Over time, neighbours passed along tales about what had happened to him, including that he had been taken by the devil, or the pirates carried him off in the order to get him to tell the location of buried treasure. Owen's incredible disappearance was never solved and became a popular piece of local lore. The story would fade, but become local news again in 1813, when some routine construction in Septon Malay unearthed a human skeleton. Everybody jumped to the conclusion that it must be Owen's remains, and theories were put forward as to how Owen's body had come to such an undignified end. The medical community nipped the gossip in the bud, however, when it stated that the skeleton was that of a young female. Another episode of construction in the area in 1933 shed new light on Owen's fate. He remains one of the southwest England's most intriguing mysteries. What on earth happened to Elisa Lamb? The mysterious circumstances surrounding her bizarre death and eerie evidence give rise to many theories, but without new information coming to light, we may never know. Deaths and disappearances are an unfortunate reality of our society, with thousands occurring each year, a large proportion of which go unsolved. Not many deaths and disappearances, however, play out like the eerie plot from a Hollywood horror movie. The unfathomable strangeness surrounding the ultimately unresolved death of Elisa Lamb makes one such case. Lamb was a 21-year-old Canadian student studying in Vancouver. In January 2013, she embarked alone on what she intended to be a tour of numerous cities on the west coast of the USA. Beginning her holiday in San Diego, she visited the zoo and wrote about the city on her blog, then continued on, arriving in Los Angeles on the 26th of January. There, she checked into the Cecil Hotel. After 5 days of sightseeing, Elisa was scheduled to check out and continue her journey to Santa Cruz. On this day, though, her parents had not received her daily phone call from their daughter. Finding this uncharacteristic of Elisa, they contacted the LA police to report her disappearance. Hotel staff said she was alone on the morning of her disappearance, and the manager of a nearby bookstore, the last person to report seeing her alive, described her as an outgoing, very lively, very friendly, having come in to buy gifts for her family. Police proceeded to search the hotel with scent tracking dogs, but were unable to search the building to a thorough extent, due to the absence of any probable cause of a crime had been committed. They found nothing. On the 6th of February, the LAPD posted flyers around the neighbourhood, urging anyone with information to come forward. A week passed, with no new leads, and then the case took its first sharp turn towards the bizarre. On February 16th, the LAPD released a surveillance video from the hotel, taken on the 1st of February. The unsettling video depicts Elisa in one of the hotel's elevators, acting in an extremely bizarre manner. It shows her peeking in and out of the elevator, hiding in the corner, pressing multiple buttons, and erratically gesturing and dancing in the hallway outside the elevator. She then exits the elevator, and the door slides closed and opens several times before the video ends. By the time of the video's release, media attention around the case was ramping up. It emerged that the Cecil Hotel had a long history of criminal activity, including murders and suicide. The disappearance of a young university student played heavily on the conscience of the public. and the baffling and peculiar behaviour shown on the elevator video spawned a myriad of theories of Elisa's disappearance, from drug intoxication to mental disorders and even demonic possession. It was about this time that guests of the hotel began to complain of strange tasting, discoloured water, and low water pressure in their rooms. Employees began to investigate the plumbing of the building. This led them to a gruesome discovery in the water tanks on the roof of the building. Inside one of the tanks, floating naked next to her clothes and belongings, was the partially decomposed body of Elisa Lamb. The discovery of the body brought up more questions than it seemed to answer. The autopsy found no evidence of trauma or sexual assault, no traces of illicit drugs, and no evidence that Elisa had attempted suicide. It listed the death as accidental drowning. The investigation ceased, but many vital questions remained unanswered in the Canadian tragedy. The water tanks in question were propped up on cement blocks without easy access, and had heavy, difficult to displace lids, which were found close with the body inside. Access to the roof itself was locked and alarmed. How had Elisa managed to get up there, enter the tank, and replace the lid all by herself? The video remained a prominent source of confusion and discussion even after Elisa's body was found. Was her baffling behaviour a result of manic freeze of her bipolar disorder? Many proposed a more sinister alternative. Her movements can be explained as an interaction with another individual not visible in the video, a pursuer. Was someone else involved in her death? Interesting enough, it appears the video may have been altered at some point before its release. The timestamp is obscured, some parts of the video appear slowed down, and nearly a minute of footage has been subtly removed mid-video. Disturbingly, Elisa's blog remained active for many months after her death. Auto-posting features may explain this away, but Elisa's phone was never found after her death, suggesting an alternative source of these online updates. Finally, uncanny parallels can be drawn between Lamb's sad demise and the Hollywood horror film Dark Water. The film followed the tenants of a building who experienced black water coming from their taps and other eerie phenomena, culminating in the grisly discovery of the body of a girl decaying on the rooftop water tank. Weirder still is that this movie was released in 2005, 5 years before Elisa's death. Having spent all of his life living in Chicago, it isn't too surprising to learn that author Eugene Izzi wrote his fiction on the classic hardboiled style made famous by the likes of Mickey Spillane and Dashiell Hammett. In his life, Izzi never reached the heights of fame that his predecessors for his writing, but is arguably more famous for the way that his life ended. December 7, 1996 was a busy Saturday in the run-up to Christmas. Just before noon, a man that was walking down Michigan Avenue happened to glance upwards and became embroiled in a mystery that is yet to be satisfactorily solved. 14 floors above street level, a man was dangling outside of a window. When the police arrived several minutes later, they breached the door and discovered a puzzling scene. The victim was identified as Eugene Izzi, and the surly man had asphyxiated by the noose around his neck. The other end of the rope was tied to a steel desk. A fully loaded handgun was found on the floor, but had not been used. Izzi's pockets contained several items that really only posed more questions than they answered. $481 in cash, a set of brass knuckles, a can of what was assumed to be mace, and notes regarding a batch of threatening phone calls. Izzi was dressed in a bulletproof vest when discovered. For about a month after the discovery, detectives hid a certain detail about the scene. In addition to the items found in and around the office, and inside Izzi's pockets, an 800-page manuscript was also found. It was a draft for a new novel that Izzi was working on. Avon Books, Izzi's publishers, were not even aware that it was in development. Contained within these pages might have been a premonition, or even an inspiration. One detailed scene in the manuscript outlines how a Chicago-based author is thrown out of a 14th-floor window attached to a noose. This victim had brass knuckles and mace on him at the time. The draft reveals that Indiana militant men were responsible for the act of violence. All during the Christmas period, much talk was about what precisely happened. Friends, family, and fans all wanted to know one thing: how did Izzi's life end? Opinion was divided. Those that subscribed to murder were very happy to accept that the research melted that Izzi was rumoured to have infatuated for research staged the murder to look like a suicide that almost wanted to be notified by everyone. If it was a murder, then how come the gun was not used? It would take a very large and determined person to hoist a burly 220-pound man through a window. Another suggestion made was that this was exactly what it looked like, a suicide. Izzi wasn't an author that openly and consistently promoted himself, but it was known that he had battled drug addiction and alcoholism. Perhaps things got too much to handle, and this seemed like his only escape. On January 15th, the official answer was delivered. The Cook County Coroner's Office ruled Izzi's death to be a suicide. His family accepted this finding, but not all of his friends did. Given his distaste for publicity, committing suicide in a style such as this does not seem a contradiction that strikes some of his friends as cold. Neither of these ideas can conclusively end the debate. Either one is as plausible as the other. A new suggestion was made afterwards. Perhaps this was not a murder or suicide at all. Could Eugene and Izzi have been acting out the scene from his manuscript and something went horribly wrong? If this is actually what happened, then it would seem to be a little extreme, even for someone that was known to have suffered from serious issues. This would not explain the firearm that was found. Accident, suicide, murder. It isn't likely that the answer will ever come to light.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.